Okay, let's start with the big question. How did you die?
So I became incredibly ill, and no one could figure out what was wrong with me until I was in ICU, and they determined I had a blood clot the size of a foot in my leg. And then they did a MRI, and they kept me in the MRI machine probably for about 4 hours, actually. And finally, they let me out of that, and I went upstairs. They rolled me upstairs. And next day, my best friend and my doctor came into the room, and they said, we're going to send you to San Diego. We found this operation. It's highly successful, so you should be fine. And he drew a little diagram. I didn't quite understand it. And then they sent me by ambulance down to San Diego. And I went in, and I met the surgeon, Dr. Daly. And I still didn't know what the operation was. All I know is my parents were there, and some friends were there. And what I'd heard later, that my friends who knew about the operation were on the phone when the doctor told them, yes, they're going to have to kill him in order for him to survive.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who is out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode.
Hey, welcome to The Exploding Human. I'm Bob Nickman, your host. Really enjoyed the interview that you're about to hear. You heard a little bit at the beginning. His name is Alan Liebert, and Alan was dead, and then he wasn't dead. And we're going to hear a lot about that. I don't want to tell you too much about his story because I'd rather have him unfold it for you. And he did become, after this experience, a licensed psychotherapist because his mission became to help other people. And we talk about a lot of stuff besides this death experience. We talk about stress in our society and how we define success. We get into talking a little bit about aging and the power of silence. And most of all, what it means to be alive. So let's get this thing going and let Alan tell you what happened. This is Alan Liebert.
I met the doctors. There was multiple of them. And the surgeon, who I spent very little time with. But a social worker came in, and she said, "You understand what this operation is?" And I said, "No." She says, "Well, we're going to flatline you." And I said, "Well, what does that actually mean?" She says, "We're going to have to kill you. And the way it goes is we freeze your brain, we freeze your heart, and then what happens is, while you're frozen, because we can't have blood flow happen because the clots may move, they open you up, and they have these tools to take the clots out." And I said, "Well, how many clots are there?" And they said, "Well, there's 30. I said, "What's the success rate?" They said, "Well, we've done 100 of these, and only 2 people have survived." At which point I said, "Can I do acupuncture or chiropractic?" And they looked at me like, "Are you nuts?" And then one of the other doctors came in and said, "Well, if you don't have the operation, we'll have to send you to a skilled nursing facility, and you'll be dead probably within 8 weeks because you're shooting off lots of clots." So they ran me through a whole bunch of tests, and they determined, yes, I could have the operation. At which point I had to sign a piece of paper that was legal that went to a judge in San Diego because you were not allowed to kill people in California at that time, and I signed it. My parents were there, and so then what happened is about 2 days before the operation, a gentleman walks in who's also part of the treatment team, and he says, "I need you to really know and understand that only 2 people have lived from this operation."
What year was this?
91.
Okay.
I said, "I understand that." He says, "So there is that possibility you may not come back." And I said, do me a favor in the future. If you decide to come to my room, I want you to turn around and not come in it, because I don't want to hear anything negative about what's going to happen, because my belief is I'm going to pull through this. I'm going to have a great life. I'm thinking about what kind of clothes I want to wear and what I want to do after I'm out of here. But please don't ever come in my room again and mention anything negative to me. I already know what the statistics are. So that morning, my father came in, walked me while they were putting me under, and I went in the room. And then I have a friend of mine who told me they should put whale music on after I'm out of the operation with headphones. So one of my best friends got me a whale tape. I think it was Paul Winter, a CD, and they got a CD recorder. And so I came out of the operation, and I asked them if they would put that on my head while I was recovering or coming out of because what they did is they froze my brain and my heart, and then they stopped all blood flow and stopped all heartbeat. And so I don't know how I was unconscious for 2 days. And then I remember I woke up, and my mother was there, and she goes, "You're okay," and she was crying. And then they had to pull these things out of my chest, which I told them to give me as much morphine as possible, and it didn't do me any good. I was screaming. So painful. And then I went upstairs, and then the surgeons came in with their staff, and they were smiling at me. And I didn't understand why. And then they showed me a picture of all the clots, and it was like a Christmas tree. And the surgeon said, this has been a remarkable case. As soon as we got the clots out, you went back to normal on everything. And so I said, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for your help. At which point they showed me the picture. And they said, "Do you want a copy of it?" And I said, "Not really." And so I was in the hospital. They wanted to release me a few days earlier because I was doing so well, but I thought I needed to stay for a little bit longer. And I thought a friend of mine came to pick me up that morning. The chest incision was a little, I guess, kind of tore a little bit, so I had some blood on my shirt, so they had to redo something before I left. I drove home with him. And I thought that was the end of this. Well, it wasn't. It was the beginning, actually.
Okay, so first of all, how long were you're frozen for how long?
25 minutes on the left side, then 25 minutes on the right side, so it was a total of 50 minutes.
That's a long time to not be alive.
It was a long time to not be alive. I don't think I ever realized it. One of my best friends who was there during the time was instrumental in making this all happen. Without him, I would not be here talking to you. He said to me, I guess it was about 2 years ago, we had lunch. He goes, "You've never been the same since your operation." And I said, "I know, and I can't do anything about it. It's just I'm different." And so I never really knew what that was, but I started to, about a year later, I was in the film business, and I started hearing someone call my name, and I'd go outside and look, and there was no one there, so I started thinking went to the doctors, and he said I was having these headaches, and I would get really tired because it takes a while to recover from this.
Were you actually having headaches?
I was having some, what they call ocular headaches, so I would see, I'd look at something, and I'd see it as if it was water. There were ripples in what I was seeing.
But it didn't hurt.
Didn't hurt. And then I would get some headaches, and I'd have to take a nap. So I went from there. I went back in the movie business, which I call the silly business. And I did that, and they told me to do as much as I could for as long as I could, because they told me before I left there was no longitudinal studies on my operation, that the statistics are fairly bad. They were exactly what I shared earlier, which is only 2% survived. And so I didn't find out until I was in St. Louis. I saw the number 5 clot guy in the world. Every place I moved, I saw the number 1 person. They were all interested in the case, which I could never figure out. I just thought I was just another human being walking the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And I was waiting to see him. And all of a sudden, it's 40 minutes, and I'm thinking to myself, what am I waiting for this guy? I've already been dead. And what's he going to tell me? And so I was getting ready to jump off the table, and all of a sudden the door swings open, and he walks in. I didn't know who he was, but this little guy who was German walked in with a German accent, and it followed by 6 other doctors. And I'm sitting there, and I'm just going, what's that? What's this about? And they start applauding me. And I said, and I've never used this word before, so this is why I remember this even more clearly. I said, what's the fanfare about? And he said, well, we don't see people like you. I said, what does that mean? I'm just blood and water. He said, no. We don't see people like you. Everyone that's had your operation is dead. We don't know how you got here, and we don't know how we're seeing you. But it's pretty amazing. That's why I brought everyone in. So I'm going to ask the other doctors to leave, and then I'll interview, and we'll talk. And so that's when I started to realize, actually, that this was a bigger deal than I thought, because I just went back into life. I did notice that I was very sensitive to people and what they were feeling. And I was always very curious about people in general. And I became even more curious about how people grow and how they encourage their life to move forward and what gets in their way. And that was always of interest to me anyway. I was brought up with a father who was a war hero and a mother who was incredibly intuitive. And they were a really interesting couple. And the thing that I remember the most about them is they had a sofa. And on that sofa, people could come whether they were in trouble or doing okay. But within 15, 20 minutes, they'd start to slide down the sofa and fall asleep. And I thought that was like a pretty incredible thing about my parents and their heart and how they felt about people.
So the people would just relax and feel safe.
And they'd fall asleep. Yes. Even people that they had problems with in the past, if they were in trouble, they were welcome. So I got into a couple of different things as we talked about previously. I worked in government for a while. And then I got married for a while and had a divorce, which was fairly traumatic. It's not something I really believe in or wanted, but it was something that happened. And then what happened is I decided, you know what, I really want to work with people. I want to help as many people as I can before it's my time to go again, or what I would say is go back home. I finished up all these hours and I got my license. I'm a licensed marriage family therapist now. I work for a Fortune 200 company. I work in one of their divisions that does psychotherapy, behavioral health. I see lots of couples, individuals, families. I see people who are getting ready to pass and people who are still struggling with life to take another breath. I think that personal growth is very important, and I don't think we take it so seriously in our life because we're so focused on the to-do list and also the things that we have to show that we're successful. But there's all different kinds of forms of success in life. And from my experience, and certainly working with all these people, I probably had up to almost 4,000 or 5,000 sessions. What I find is if you don't focus so much on what the problem is or the symptom, what happens is you focus on their growth and they can grow. Then all of a sudden there's a sense of freedom and meaning and purpose in their life. I've had people that can barely walk. I've had people who are getting ready to pass. I've had couples that are having problems. And if you can help facilitate them to honor their lives and what they're trying to accomplish, but also how they can grow as individuals personally, I find that they have more meaning and more purpose in life, and some of the symptoms just fall away. The symptoms are like, they're tools. They're not different than a screwdriver, a hammer, a wrench, or things like that. They're things the personality uses from the unconscious, because I do believe in the unconscious. Since I was unconscious, as we previously said, I believe that the symptoms are there for not everyone, but for a lot of people I work with that are there they're learning tools to learn about you and to learn about what your path is in life and what you're supposed to be, who you're supposed to be. And that I find frees people up a lot more, frees couples up, individuals up.
Yeah, I kind of look at problems as roadmaps, as the direction that I need. It's a way to direct me where I need to go and what I need to work on, not necessarily solve the actual problem. With you've probably heard this. The answer to the problem is not in the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're looking at a bigger picture, which is they probably didn't teach you that in school, though, did they? Did they talk about that?
I don't think so. I think that I think there's such a focus on resolving problems and having people go out the door as soon as possible that I think that gets in the way of people's personal growth.
When your friend said to you, "You're different," what did he mean, and what do you think is the difference? And is there not just the way you think necessarily, but physically you might feel different? Does the world itself? How does the world itself feel different? What are the differences, and maybe the priorities that changed? Because it seems like when you read about people that have passed and come back, sometimes they're almost. I've known a few of them, and one woman said, "I'm not even the same person. Something else entered me. Some other soul." She goes, "I'm not who I was. I don't even look the same."
The great way to share this with you is that I went to see a fairly famous photographer. A friend of mine introduced me to him. I didn't know that the friend told him my story because I don't really talk about my story that much. I do. The people that were there, they all know the story, and so he asked me something. He says, "Well, what was your experience like with this?" I said, "Whatever it is evolving me." Oftentimes we look at life and we accomplish all these things, and those things are evolving us. So we have a new car, we have a new house, we have these things, we get these new shirts, and that shows that we're evolving in a certain context. My experience is that whatever happened to me is evolving me, and I'm kind of along for the ride. And it doesn't mean I don't have cognition and abilities to make decisions and make mistakes, because I certainly make mistakes like all of us, because we're supposed to make mistakes. They're important because it helps us learn about ourselves. And so I would say that what's happened is evolving me. And my assumption is when it's done teaching me what I need to learn, then I'll be ready to go back home again.
That's a nice way to look at it. I told you that, I didn't tell you this, but I've mentioned it on the podcast. I said I was going to tell you this story that I remember my birth experience, and it wasn't like I would remember, walking through that door when we entered this room, but it was going from it was like a dark place and this big energy, like kind of scary energy, almost like an explosion type feeling, and being really scared. And then the next moment was this big internal laugh and the thought, "Oh yeah, this again."
Mm-hmm.
And I've remembered that my whole life. And I have mentioned it before in other podcasts because it was such a powerful experience. And I know that that's influenced my entire life because I never forgot it.
Did it give you the feeling that there was more than you?
Absolutely.
And
I've always thought that.
And that gives you some comfort, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of comfort in that. And it's also, I can't explain it, in any other way than just that I know it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing. It's just what it is. And I can't prove anything. I can't even say that I didn't think that when I was 2, except I didn't. I know that it happened.
Mm-hmm.
I just know it. It's in me. I don't know how many times I've been here before, but this isn't the first.
Right. So when you meet people, certainly when I meet people, what I look at is that it's really important to be as responsible as you can in your interactions with them. In the sense that there's all sorts of different people on the planet. One of the stories I like to say is, or to share is, that if you find a pond and you throw a pebble in the pond, there's circles of water. Into the frog, those circles of water are a wave. To a fish, the water is air. To a horse that's been running and stopping at the pond, the water's sustenance. And to the sky, the pond is a reflection of itself. So one thing, a pond, can mean so many different things to living and also other entities in our planet and what we do.
Oh, I love that. Never heard that one before.
But I developed them.
That's why.
I developed these.
I haven't talked to you before.
Yes.
This is all new.
Yeah.
You know what I've been running into lately? I don't know why my mind is going here right now, but I've been running into a lot of people lately who have trouble sleeping. They have insomnia, and they really struggle with it. And I always felt like somebody once said to me, well, that's a spiritual problem. If you're waking up at 2 a.m, that's something inside you giving you a message. I don't want to say that to people that get mad at you. And,
Right.
You don't know because you don't have it. And it's like, well, you're right. I don't have that one. I don't have a sleep issue. But when I'm troubled, I do.
Yes. Yes.
So I'm not saying 100% of people with insomnia have some sort of a spiritual malady necessarily. There might be a physical component, but do you run into that a lot with clients, patients?
Well, I think that it can be from multiple different things. Our society, regrettably at this time, is fairly stressful. And in of that self, just by that, people are under more stress, and that's going to affect their fitful sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of look at it more of a grounded way than more of a spiritual way that people are being called up. I do believe in dreams, and I believe in the unconscious, and I believe that the unconscious sends messages to us. And sometimes if we don't listen enough, they become symptoms, and then the symptoms become louder and louder until we listen and until we decide to sort of understand what we're supposed to learn from them.
Well, how did we get so stressful? I don't think my parents, when I was a kid, were that stressed. I know they had stuff, but it just didn't seem, maybe I was unaware, but it seems more now.
Today, I think people are more stressed out. I think there's a real, regrettably, division in our country. And I think that is something that we really haven't felt a lot of in the past. And so I think that on one level is impacting us. There is a very famous psychiatrist, Thomas Zaz, who wrote a book called The Myth of Mental Illness. And in that book, he talks about society has as much responsibility for what's happening to us psychologically as we do and our family does. But I think it's probably different for each person.
Yeah. It's certainly we're more violent.
Mm-hmm.
At least it gets reported more because of the saturation.
I only had one person beep at me on the way here.
Congratulations.
And that was like a good day.
That makes me feel better because I'm kind of a crappy driver and I get beeped at a lot.
Do you?
Yeah,
that's really funny.
Because I drive slow because I don't see as good as I used
Right.
to, so I'm a little more cautious. And there's a lot of impatience. I've had people honk me when I'm about to make a right turn, and there's somebody in the crosswalk, and they're honking me, like go, and I'm like, I can't.
Mm-hmm.
You want to switch places? We can do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm always like shocked at the impatience that a lot of people have, especially on the roads.
Well, I think that's absolutely true, but we're also very stimulated by all sorts of different things, from technology to other things. And there was a scene in a movie, I want to address this and see what you think of this, which is that, and certainly with mindfulness training and meditation, there's more honor and respect for silence. But there was a movie called Mississippi Burning that I saw in the 80s.
I've seen that movie.
Yeah, and there's a moment in that where William Dafoe and Gene Hackman are riding in a car, but Alan Parker, the director, stopped all sound. And they're just riding in the car, and there's no sound of the car. There's no sound of where they're going. And I thought that was really a powerful moment. And so it made me think about how powerful silence actually is. And it reminded me that actually listening is active. It's as active as talking. And so there are times when silence is really important. And you're paying just as much respect to a person when you're really listening to them because you're being active.
Yeah, it is that. That's a real skill too, because a lot of times, and I find myself doing this, not necessarily in interviews, but anywhere, where as the person's talking, I'm loading up my information to shoot it out of my mouth. I'm getting it ready. I'm not really 100% always listening. And I know we had a moment a while ago when we were talking, and you kind of looked at me like, "Go ahead." I was so listening to what you were saying that I go, I'm forgetting to talk now, which I was happy about, and I can edit whatever I need to. I probably won't, but that idea of like, there's listening and then there's really listening.
Well, that's that whole thing of being present with another person. Sometimes you could be in a session and there's nothing being said. And sometimes I will just say, well, here we are. We're just two human beings sitting here. And so I'm honoring that space. Sometimes a lot of people have grief issues and they don't know it. And so they may be experiencing grief, and you can let the grief out in the room. And the best way to let the grief out in the room is through, using silence and letting them share what it is. Sometimes people don't even know that they're grieving, which is really pretty amazing. Sometimes one person in the couple is grieving, and that's causing some of the issues in the relationship. The story I like is a couple get married, and they go for the honeymoon to Hawaii. And they're sitting in the cafe downstairs of the hotel, and the husband keeps inviting people over to introduce his wife because he's so proud that he got to marry someone so beautiful, so fantastic. And the wife is getting more irritated because she just wants to spend time alone with him. So after they get done, they go upstairs and they have a fight. And it's like, it's their honeymoon. They're already fighting. And so it's not a problem in their relationship. It's a problem in definition. He was so proud to see her with him that he wanted to share that love and how he was being respectful for how lucky he was. And she wanted quiet time with him to enjoy the moment and take it in. So it's not really a relationship problem. It's just it's a problem of definition. But sometimes those things get forgotten because we're so busy in our day-to-day life, and they come up in all different sorts of ways. And so sometimes, people think they're not really made for each other, but it's the developmental cycle they're going through as a couple.
Yeah, the perception one person might have may not even be close to the intent the other person has. What's that? We're all puppets whose strings are being pulled by the past. I always love that one.
Right.
Yeah, it's I've run into that myself in marriage. With just saying something that I thought was either innocuous or a positive, and it's been taken wrong, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And like, we better talk this one out.
Right.
I mean, after we get over being upset.
Well, that's the work of a marriage, and that's the work of love, is developing the ability to work through those moments and grow from them. Does the clay ask the clay maker what the clay maker is making? Every minute, every hour, every day, every week, every month, every year. What are you making me into? And that's kind of like our situation in life. We make ourselves into things by our choices and by our parents' choices that we forgot. And we also make ourselves into things because in reaction to the world and what the world's presenting to us. So we're constantly balancing between the two. And this is where I think the inner world becomes so important, because that's where your guidance can come from. When you know yourself and you're able to be quiet and you're able to see your choices and see the things that get in your way and get in the way of your awareness to help you make a better choice, then things become a little clearer. It doesn't mean they don't get mucky. They're supposed to. I've met many people, many couples, and many friends that are couples that have problems. And I always say the same thing. You're supposed to have problems.
Yeah, right? You don't get immunity to life just because you fall in love with somebody.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
When you were talking about, it's been sticking in my head when you said you were hearing voices. When you
I heard my name called.
You heard your name called.
Yeah.
Do you still hear that? Okay. Was it what kind of voice was it?
I just thought I heard someone yell Alan a couple times, and I thought, okay, So I went to my doctor. They did all these tests, and there's nothing going on. I wasn't psychotic. And so I went to see this gentleman who is a very famous hypnotherapist in Malibu. And I think the only reason he took me in is because of my experience. And he worked with me. And what I realized was this was part of that beginning of that process, that I was changing from who I was before to who I'm going to become. Gordon Alpert wrote a very famous book in the 50s, which was before my time, called Becoming. And we forget that we're becoming new people. So when someone comes in to see me, or a couple comes in to see me, I always see them anew, as if they're new people coming in today. I remember exactly what we talked about last time. I very seldom have to look at charts and things like that. But I see them as new people every time I see them. Whether I gain this from my parents or from my experiences, I have hope. I hold hope. And I hold hope for a lot of people.
Oh, that's really interesting. And so you're not going, well, we talked about this last week. You don't even get into that unless they do. Unless
someone presents it, because when someone comes in to see you or you see a friend, it's their opportunity and my opportunity to be with them in that time. And the more we can be together in that moment, in that time, the more connection you feel to another human being. And that also adds to the value of, our breath, that we're breathing and we're living. That keeps us going.
When you leave when a session ends, when you're seeing someone, how do you, for lack of a better way of saying it, how do you get it off of you?
Well,
is it not that, maybe that's not the experience?
That's a great question, because I don't feel I carry sometimes, but not very much do I carry it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm so focused on how can this person experience more freedom and have more of the life they want. So I'm paying attention more to that. And people have all different sorts of symptoms and feelings and thoughts, and I support all that, and I'm there for them for that. But really what I do is, I don't think I carry that much with me. I do call and check in on them,
mm-hmm.
because I think it's really important to do, because we're in a society now where there's less contact with other people. There's always an in-between step now. I mean, I had dessert with two friends, a couple, and they're great people. They're my closest friends here. And we, at least some of my closest friends. And so we sat down and we had the pie, and immediately they went to their phones, and I'm sitting across from them. And I just let it be, because that's what they were doing. And I got to see what they do when they go out sometimes. And all of a sudden I said, hey, I'm over here. And they started laughing. They thought it was hysterical. But that dynamic is what's going on. It's like people are thinking about where I have to go, what I have to do, what I want to accomplish, versus this is another human being. They had parents, and their parents want the best for them.
Yeah. I mean, I find myself, I was laying in bed last night with my wife, and we were both on our phones, not talking, but I could feel that we were together in one way, but we weren't talking. But we talk all the time, but it was an interesting thing. Like, look at us, we're not communicating.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, we were okay. It was, I didn't feel like I was missing out.
Similar to what you're sharing, and I appreciate that, which is this man owned a small farm, and he had very little animals on it. One day this horse walks up and stands in front of his house. So he walks out, he looks at the horse, and he goes back in, does more stuff he needs to do around his house. And he comes back out a couple hours later, the horse is still standing there. So he takes the horse in, puts him in his little corral, and he brushes him, cleans him, feeds him, gives him water. And the horse is there for a couple of days, and he's thinking, maybe I should put a bridle on and a saddle. Let's see if he's ever been ridden. So he puts a saddle on first, and the horse seemed to be fine with that. Then he put the bridle on him. He seemed to be fine like that. And so he leads the horse out, and he gets on top of the horse. The horse is fine with that. The horse walks out to the path, the road. So he starts going down the road, and he's just on top of him. And the horse will kind of smell something to the left, and he'll just pull on the bridle a little bit to keep him on that road, that path. And then he'd go a little bit to the right, and he'd do the same thing over and over again. And this went on for about 2 or 3 miles. Then finally the horse goes right. and he's just following, right? And the horse stops at another farm in front of another house. All of a sudden, the door swings open, and this woman comes running out. She goes, "Oh my God, you found my horse. How could you have possibly found my horse? How'd you get him here?" And he gets off the saddle. And she kisses the horse kisses her. And he goes, "Well, I just kind of moved him a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right while he was walking on the road, but he found his way home." So I would say, essentially, I got out of his way.
Mm.
And so sometimes when we're able to get things out of our way, whether they be symptoms or worries, we can see more clearly and move forward.
Do you encourage your patients to meditate?
I do teach mindfulness training. I've done it for 5 years, and I have a group that I lead, and they've been together for over a year or two, and I don't encourage them. I just offer it.
Mm-hmm.
This group has been pretty joined at the hip, and they're all kind of growing.
I've heard of mindfulness training, but I don't know one technique at all.
So, I don't think it's, you can find them on Google. There's plenty of them. But I like the counting of your breaths slowly, and imagining that your breaths are like water, like a waterfall. And the more you can slow your breath, the more you can have more awareness and get out of it. Sometimes you have a influx of thoughts, since we have a lot of thoughts anyway. And so the mindfulness training helps slow that. And you may get like a herd of them, or like, trying to control a bunch of cats.
I had one of those thought attacks this morning when I was meditating this morning, and it was just like, and I was watching it happen, and I basically was going, "Oh gosh, what is, you're way ahead of the day already."
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing all these, it's like, I got to get this meditation out of the way so I can start the important part of my day. It's really what I was thinking.
And that's great.
Yeah. I was like, come on, man, you gave yourself this time. Do it. And eventually it took a little bit longer to kind of get into it and be, just kind of float. Now, I read something this morning in the somewhere online. This is a complete left turn here, but I think it has to do with stress. That I don't know who it was. Some organization, psychiatric organization, said that there's been an increase, fairly dramatic increase, in the number of people who are having no sex at all. And I don't know if they mean just couples. I didn't read the thing, but I assume that's what they meant.
I would assume that's what they meant, but I've not read that, so
Yeah.
I don't really know.
But have you seen that in your as a?
No.
No,
Mostly what where we work on is resolving things that get in the way for their ability to move forward in their life and meet the goals and some of the things that they want.
Okay. I was going to read the article later
Yeah.
just to see what,
Yeah.
it could just be an article to, get people to read it because it has the SEX word in it.
Yeah, I have no idea.
I thought maybe that's like, all right,
don't
this
know.
is what they're doing. But I thought, well, I'll check it out because it seems kind of interesting to me. Because it seems like a stressful society would create that.
Yes. Thomas Zaz would agree with you.
Yes. I need a degree
There you go.
just for living.
Well, I think, my father said we all get our PhDs in life.
He's right about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That sounds great. And how was your mother intuitive? I'm interested in that when you say that.
She was just really. So my father was a guy that opened up concentration camps, fought in all the big battles, Battle of the Bulge, Hagenhof Forest Battle, was in France, occupied France, and he made it through all that.
So he saw some horrific things.
So his drive and the value of life, I feel like I have that in me as well. And my mother was similar and different. My father, we used to say he'd walk through a wall for you.
Mm-hmm.
My mother was like, she'd figure out how to get around that wall and get
Okay.
to you anyway. So that's how my mother was. My mother told a really interesting story once. We were sitting there, the whole family was sitting there, and she looked at us and she said, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that here I am, I'm older, and one day I'm not going to be here, and you feel kind of sad about that. But the truth is, one day you're going to be sitting in this chair, and you're going to be getting older, and someone's going to be looking at you saying, you know, I feel sad you're not going to be here, and they're going to be talking about you.
I like your mother.
Yeah.
She was willing to just sort of be open like that, huh?
She was a
Just
very open
yeah.
person, very dynamic. Family is very, very important. And, I honor that. And again, I kind of look at it through the eyes that everyone has a mother and a father, and hopefully they would want the best for them.
Most do.
And so I try to respect that in the people that are in my life and the people that I meet.
What's next for you in the...
Well, I'm appreciative of this opportunity to talk with you today, and this has been, I was very excited about coming and doing that, and I appreciate what you're offering.
Thank you.
To many people, the opportunity to hear from different people about life and how everyone experiences it.
Yeah, I get to hear a lot of cool stories. That's why I love doing this.
Yeah, I can see why.
It's really exciting because, where would I meet you were I not asking people about, do you know anybody would suit this podcast?
Mm-hmm.
And our friend Susan said, oh, you got to call Alan.
Oh, I'm lucky for Susan.
Yeah, right?
Just to have Susan in my life.
Yeah. Now, do you have any books or anything like that?
No, I have no books. I've not written anything, but I've given talks. I've given a bunch of different talks.
Okay.
I gave one on relationships about 2 years ago, which was really turned out very good from what the response was. The only reason I can tell if it turns out good is if the person says it was good. The only reason I can tell if people like the work we do together is if they decide to come back.
Yeah. Right?
I only know it by the last person that I see, how they did, and that's what's important.
Well, and sometimes what you do is good and it's not recognized. Sometimes something that's not that good is recognized.
I think that's really interesting. One experience I have had is I have had a lot of people tell me that after we get done talking that they're still thinking about what we talked about.
Oh, that's a huge compliment.
2 or 3 weeks later, they're still thinking about what we had discussed or what story I'd shared and how that story has helped them think about things differently.
Yes. I used to say that because I used to do stand-up. And I'd say it's not who gets the most laughs per minute on stage. It's who are the people talking about in the car ride on the way home.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. What really went in there? What person are they thinking about?
So after my operation, I used to go and see movies a bunch because we're a movie group. My family has been, and I was in that business. And so I remember for a period of time after my operation, which happened in May, actually, in 28 years ago, I'm in some record journal somewhere, according to my doctors. And so after we get done with the movie, they'd say, where do you want to go? And I would say, you know what? I just want to go down the 3rd Street Promenade. I just want to walk with people. And I have an affinity of just wanting to be around lots of people and seeing people and seeing what people do and being part of them. And I found this in every place I lived, and I found that to be actually a very healing experience.
And more so since the surgery.
I didn't really do that before the surgery. So I noticed that is something that has been different as well.
And do you interact with these people, or you don't? You just kind of be?
Just walk with them.
Yeah.
Because it's, being part of humanity, which is really a beautiful thing.
It's almost like it's just you want to appreciate being alive. And the best way to do that is to be around life energy, which is a lot of people.
Right. I mean, was my experience. One of the things that I came back with was recognizing in maybe a deeper way the subtleties of the human experience.
Well, it's really, your life is a miracle. If you were to look at anything statistically, it certainly is. And
That's what my mother would always say.
Yeah.
When I'd walk in the door, she'd say to me, "Here's our miracle." And my sister had said that as well. And I've had other people say, I had doctors say it to me as well.
Well, I mean, if you're going to define a miracle, this fits. But the miracle really, to me, also is not only that happened, but how you evolved into this
it's
other kind of being.
Well, you find that you want to be a really good person. Certainly that's part of it. And being a good person is not easy. It takes dedication and it takes responsibility to make choices that are, what you would feel within that milieu of being a good person.
Yeah. I mean, what stands in the way for probably most people, but certainly for myself, and sometimes I get really wound up about it, is when my selfishness creeps in and gets in the way of me being a good person. And it's like a battle sometimes where I'm like, well, I want to do this, but that's, I could go over here and be a better person and do that, but then I don't get to do this selfish thing that I want to do.
So you can titrate it. You can balance it.
Well, that's what I try to do.
Some
days I'm like, man, you really are a selfish person.
Yeah, you could titrate it and figure out what you get from each part.
Yeah.
And what's the end goal and what do you actually feel? How do you feel about yourself when you choose one over the other?
Well, I invariably feel better when I'm of service to somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that is a really, I think that's really important.
Yeah. I mean, I really get the most satisfaction out of that and meditation. Those are the two biggest things that make me feel good.
Oddly enough for me, meditation as well, and music.
Yeah.
Music seems to really move me.
I forget who this was. I'd love to be able to talk to this person. They went into these places, assisted livings and retirement homes, and people that had certain cognitive disorders and couldn't speak and seemed to be lost in their own worlds, and they would put music on in headphones. It was a program that somebody developed, and they would start to move their bodies to the music, and people who hadn't spoken would start to speak. It literally went into their brain in a way that they couldn't be reached any other way. It's amazing.
That is amazing.
I wish I could remember the name. It was, and this person got some funding to get little, music players and headphones and go into these places. And I think they did a documentary on it. It was really, I mean, you're weeping because these people have been trapped inside their heads,
right,
and their bodies, and haven't been able to communicate. But obviously, when you see them doing this stuff, there's stuff there was thoughts and feelings going on the whole time. But and a lot of them weren't treated well, not abused necessarily, but just sort of pushed to the side and marginalized because they couldn't communicate.
There's a thing called reminiscence psychotherapy now that's been developed. It's employed for people that have Alzheimer's and memory issues, and dementia. And so what it is you have a group of people together, and they are in similar age range, and they start playing music or bring artifacts from that earlier time, so they can all talk about their memories about them. It impacts their mood. So they become more positive.
Those memories of youth when you're just starting to enter the world are really powerful. The music from the time of when I was a teenager still impacts me in a very emotional way. More so than the stuff I hear now that I like just as much.
Right.
It makes me feel the way I felt back then,
Mm-hmm. And that energy and that feeling can help you do more in your life.
Yeah. I had a guy a guy who was younger than me. He made fun of the Allman Brothers, and I love the Allman Brothers.
I did too, actually.
Yeah. And he goes, "Oh, you listen to the Allman Brothers?" And I got mad. They're a great band.
Yeah, don't destroy my memory.
And he was basically saying, "You're an old guy, but so what?"
Right.
I love that.
We're all going there.
Yeah, if you're lucky.
That's right. If you're lucky, you're going there. I'm getting to be older.
Yeah.
I think of my birthdays as a positive thing. I'm still here. I'm still another guy walking the planet like everyone else.
That's what I think. I don't unless somebody says something, I don't think about my age. It's amazing the arrogance of youth. I used to look at, quote, old guys who are my age now and I'd have both of a judgment of that's an old guy and also, but that guy knows some stuff. I had both.
I had a friend when I lived in the Midwest, and I was maybe 48, 47, and he was 88. And we used to sit and we had lunch every week. He was one of the most fantastic people I've ever met. And so one day he turned to me, he says, you're like a baby compared to me. Why would you sit and talk to someone like me? And I said, well, you're smart, you're funny, you got great morals and ethics, and you're cool. And he started to smile. He goes, no one's ever said I was cool. But it was really an interesting experience because here we are, two people just spending time and being drawn toward having a friendship, and how that developed and
I love that.
And changed us.
I had that kind of relationship. It was family, but it was my grandfather on my mother's side. And we used to sit on his back porch and talk. And I remember being 15, 16 years old, kind of lost, lost teenager. And I would drive over there to my grandfather's house just to sit and talk to him. And he would tell me stories about, growing up in Russia and what it was like, and when he came here and working as a carpenter. To me, it was the most fascinating thing because I got to travel in time, take this journey with him. But not only did I take the journey informationally, but I felt it because it was a connection that we had. And some of the stories, just being in this small town in Russia with, wooden planks for sidewalks and being pushed into the mud by, Russian police and, just stuff that I'd never experienced. And, he came from, the other side of the world in the late 1800s. It was just so different. And I was like, wow, and I remember just going home going, what was that like? And here he is in this little house in Cleveland, Ohio, talking to this kid that he didn't know back then, who's his grandson. And those memories, I can feel it as I talk about it. I can feel it right now.
That's beautiful.
What that felt.
And I think that's what we have. That's what we offer each other. You miss that a lot. People often talks about texting and how what you miss is the tone.
Completely.
Because it's flat. And so that's what you miss with real, storytelling. Sam Keen wrote a book a long time ago. He's a philosopher and a writer and in humanistic psychology, and he wrote a book called Beginnings Without End. So all of our stories are beginnings without end. They continue as long as we continue, as long as we're able to hear others.
That sounds like a book I'd want to read, and I may just do that.
Yeah, you might be able to find it.
Well, thanks for coming to talk to me. I could sit here and do this for hours.
Well, thank you.
Except the headphones are hurting.
Okay. I'm very appreciative, and I'm honored, and I feel it's a privilege to be able to talk with you and have the opportunity to share some of my experiences.
Oh, it's amazing. I feel luckier than you do by a lot, I think.
Well, then we're both lucky.
Alan Liebert, thank you so much. That was a very exciting interview for me. I just love talking to Alan, and just being in the room with him was extraordinary. That's all I can tell you about that. So thanks for listening in. Hope you come back and check out some more episodes of The Exploding Human. Have a great day.